Brooklyn's historic The Black Lady Theater is now taking bookings. Host your next birthday party, concert, networking event, baby or bridal shower, wedding, art show, gala, corporate event, live stage play, audition, and so much more. At the one and only The Black Lady Theater. Mention code GODCAST for 15% off your rental fee. Code good for the first time customers only. Valid for a limited time. Call 718-771-0900 to book your event today.
Hey, today is Friday, August 30th. Making today's math.
Understanding cipher, all being born to understanding.
That's right. Understanding is the best part, for it is the culmination of knowledge and wisdom. Cipher is a person, place, a thing existing of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Peace.
Welcome back to Yanadameen Godcast. I'm Lord Jamar.
I'm Digga.
Godfrey.
We got Team Yanadameen in the house. Clap it up. Studio audience. We got YouTube live in the motherfucking house. And right about now, we have our special guest. He is a director. He is a grandson of some famous people that we'll talk about a little later. I'm not even going to drop that bomb on you yet. We're gonna give that reveal in a minute. But he has a documentary coming out on HBO about Yusuf Hawkins. Everybody, welcome Muta'Ali to the United
Yeah.
States.
Woo.
Yeah. How are you, sir?
Good, how you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Yes,
Good to
sir.
have
Yes, sir.
So Yusuf Hawkins.
Right.
Yusuf Hawkins is a name that I feel I haven't heard in maybe 30 years. I remember on Brand Nubian's first album, Sadat X had a solo song called Concerto in X minor. And in that song, he mentions Yusuf Hawkins. And they were mad that we were squawking, is what he said. They try to show false compassion, but at the rally, they try to bash in our brains, further adding to the bloodstains. But anyway,
Shouts out to everybody who had Yusuf Hawkins.
Shout out to-
I had a Yusuf Hawkins
she had
line.
Yusuf Hawkins line.
Yeah, you always said U.S.
On Dirty Harriet.
Did Chubb Rock have a
Chubb
U.S.
Rock.
Chubb Rock.
Yeah.
In
Right.
Treat Me Right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and Public Enemy.
Republican, yeah.
Yeah.
They had the Bensonhurst. Probably
They
talking about
mentioned
Bensonhurst.
Yeah.
They talked about, Yusuf Hawkins.
Yeah.
So, Yusuf Hawkins, for those of you that don't know, 16-year-old young black male who was murdered basically going into a white neighborhood in Bensonhurst, a predominantly Italian neighborhood, where they were, looking at a car, looking to buy a used car, something like that, and ultimately was mistaken supposedly for somebody else that was messing with a white girl around there. And, these guys were beat up, and ultimately Yusuf Hawkins was shot, twice?
Yeah, he got shot 4 times, but
4
2
times.
times in the heart.
Wow.
Christ.
Directly in the
So
heart.
he ultimately died. Protests came from this, and this ultimately, the protest that came about from Yusuf Hawkins' death actually helped to put David Dinkins, the first black mayor and only black mayor of New York City, put him into office and get
He was in the middle of a
and
lot
get
of shit.
Koch the fuck
Yeah.
up out of there.
But then they put him in some shit. Because I was in Chicago at the time that whole Dinkins stuff was happening. They were giving him hell. Like when we had our first black mayor here in Washington.
Right.
They just gave him hell.
Well, there was a lot going on that year in the year of '89. That was the year of Tawana Brawley,
The Central Park.
Central
that happened
Park.
in April.
Like all of this
Wow,
happened
right.
in one calendar year.
And then a few years before that, they had
Michael Griffin.
which was another part. What was it? Howard Beach.
Right.
And another similar white boys chased the brother onto the highway where he got hit by a car. And this was all, evidence of the racial divide that existed in America then, and it still exists in America to this very day. So it's ironic. What's that? You good? So it's ironic, 30 years later, and, from the day of this taping, maybe 2 days from now would be the actual.
Right, August 23rd, yeah.
August 23rd makes 30 years from the day of Yusuf Hawkins' death. So tell us, what motivated you to do this story, how you got into it, how it ended up coming to HBO. Let's start
I got
there.
invited to be a part of this story because I did a documentary called Life's Essentials with Ruby D, and that came out in 2014. And Victorious DaCosta, who's in the audience there, he called me and told me about he had been working with Charles Darby, one of Yusuf's childhood friends. Charles Darby had a dream about Yusuf, and Yusuf came to him in the dream and said, "Don't forget me." So Charles, he's not a filmmaker, but he's a driven person, and he was like, "I know I got to do something." So he was reaching out on social media, eventually connected with Victorious, who's also a filmmaker. And Victorious, he had liked the project that I did before. And we all joined together, and my producing partner, Javon Frank, joined with us. So the four of us, for a good year or so, pushed hard, the whole bootstrapping thing, get your pennies together, borrowing money, trying to, and at that point, I was on the fence at the beginning because I was 10 years old in '89. So I had a child's perspective of what happened. And I'm not from Brooklyn, but Victorious is from Brooklyn, Charles is from Brooklyn, and my business partner is from Brooklyn. So I had a good cabinet of people to keep the story in the hearts and minds positive in terms of people from Brooklyn. But coming from Westchester, I had to do my own research. I confused Yusuf with Yusuf Salaam because it was the same year, Yusuf Salaam from the Exonerated Five. And there's a great book by John DeSantis called For the Color of His Skin about what happened to Yusuf. And I read that, and I had to decide, how am I going to dedicate 4 years? It usually takes about 4 years of your heart, really, when you're doing a documentary. How am I going to dedicate myself to this if I'm not fully in it? What is it about this story that's really going to make me commit to it? And the first thing was meeting Yusuf's mother, and then meeting some of Yusuf's friends, and seeing a little bit of how their hearts are doing now, all these years later, and it's still so fresh with them. And I don't think they ever had a chance to really tell their story, and especially when it comes to Miss Hawkins, she never really, at that time, she was grieving so heavy inside. She didn't. I don't think she had a chance to get it out. So that kind of, I was like, you know what, I got to do. It's definitely worth 4 years to just, let's make this happen. So we interviewed them just on our own dime, and interviewed Yusuf's friend Luther, who was right next to Yusuf when he got shot.
Oh, wow.
And he hadn't talked about it in 30 years. He talked about it then to the legal people, what he had to do. But he said he bottled it up for 30 years. So there's a lot of pain out there that I'm like, okay, we got to give people the opportunity to get this off their chest and tell the story, because it's relevant now, sadly, obviously, not only because people of color still killed for the color of their skin, but the denial was so heavy back then, the way the denial is so heavy right now.
Right.
Like people were saying, like, oh, New York is the melting pot. And that's what Dinkins was kind of running on, that whole gorgeous mosaic. And really, people weren't really appreciating that, because New York, there was a lot of violence that could happen when you cross certain borders. There was a lot of, there's segregation in New York now, and there is back then. And that had something to do with how they prejudged Yusuf before he arrived in Bensonhurst, and shot him 4 times before they asked him who he even was,
Right.
So we pushed hard and eventually connected with the American Black Film Festival and Lightbox Entertainment. Lightbox is a multi-Oscar winning documentary production company. and
Out of
they helped us
London?
develop. Huh?
Out of London, yes.
Yeah, they're London, and then they expanded out to L.A. They've done Searching for Sugar Man, L.A. '92, all these dope films. And with them, we developed the film a little further and took it to HBO, and they were excited, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." So HBO
Nice.
funded the picture.
HBO.
Clap it up.
Clap it up, HBO.
That's my channel.
Okay.
That's my channel.
So it's official now,
That's what's up. So you mentioned your first film, which was
Life's Essentials with Ruby D.
now Life's Essentials with Ruby D, which was about your grandparents,
That's Ruby D.
who are Ossie Davis and Ruby D.
Wow.
Right.
What?
Do the right thing. 1989.
Right. Exactly.
Legends,
Right.
ancestors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we created that. Unfortunately, my grandmother passed away like soon as we finished that film. The day we finished the audio mix on that film, I went to her house and she had passed away. But she knew the value of that film was not just tell part of me and grandpa's life story. She knew that in that film it features a grandson, me as a filmmaker trying to learn from a grandmother, and she knew that when people see that sort of love, that sort of intergenerational respect and exchange, she felt like people would really, really bond with that no matter where they come from. So I'm really proud of what we did with the Life's Essentials film because it inspires people when we do screenings. I'm going to go talk to my grandmother on film and see what she thinks about this and that. But we really focused on love, art, and activism in that film, which is what, Ossie Davis and Ruby D represent to a lot of people, love, art, and activism.
How was it to, come up, under the aura of two, icons?
It's hard to explain because I don't think I had the opportunity to know what it was like until I was away from it, or to know what it was like till I lived a little bit longer to be like, ooh,
That was just grandma and grandpa.
It was for the most
Right.
part, and I guess that sometimes this is how it is. But when you grow, it's like, wow, these seeds that have been planted in me since I was a kid come from my whole family, but also an inclusive of Ossie and Ruby, and they I think without them, I wouldn't have even said I want to do this project. My values have been tuned before I even had a chance to tune them up. So I think that is something that I appreciate because that's something I really didn't have anything to do with. It was just them knowing that that's what this young man is going to need. And they had 7 grandchildren, so the 7 of us kind of got, guided in a certain direction. But one thing that I feel that I think about most recently is their honesty. They were really real and honest and able to share their what they consider their pluses and their minuses, and I do think I picked up on that, and I think that's a liberating thing, and I think that they were courageous too.
Your grandfather did the eulogy for Malcolm X's funeral.
Right, absolutely.
That's like that black shining prince.
Yeah.
Right.
That's him.
Yeah,
That's
Ruby
him.
D was in the Jackie Robinson story.
Yep.
He played Robinson's wife.
Right.
55, in the 50s.
Yep, absolutely.
man.
Raising in the Sun, the original one, and like you said, Do the Right Thing in '89 when it came out. They were both in there.
So you grew up in New Rochelle.
Yeah, predominantly a little bit in Mount Vernon, but I was like 5, 7, something.
Right,
like that.
okay. So I grew up in New Rochelle as well.
Right.
Now, your grandmother and grandfather's house,
Yeah.
you probably didn't know this, but basically was right behind where Sadat grew up at. Where Sadat X from my group, he grew up, they were on Cortland Ave, he's on Hunter Ave, which is right behind there.
Yeah.
And I remember that, that was a thing. Yo, Ruby D and Ossie Davis, they live right there,
Did he ever stop by or nothing? Like he never.
Ain't nobody just ringing the bell like, hello, like,
Right?
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you.
I know Farrakhan
Did Jay-Z and
and them.
Beyonce of New Rochelle?
Farrakhan used to live in a house over there as well
Yeah.
for a short period of time
Right.
at one point.
He's in the film too.
And just being from New Rochelle, you just take pride in little shit like that. Like, you don't have to know them. Just knowing that Farrakhan lived in New Rochelle and that Ossie Davis and Ruby D, you know what I mean, was living in New Rochelle. That's something that we took pride in because,
their neighborhood was a nice neighborhood, but it wasn't that far from the hood. You know what I mean? So yeah, we definitely took pride in them coming from New Rochelle.
Absolutely. And it's funny, doing part of this project, you put a lot into the film and then you got to trim it down. And there was a scene in it about Eleanor Bumpers. You remember the lady?
Yes.
She was murdered in the Bronx.
By the
65 years
police.
old. The police kicked in her door and shot her with some shotguns. And,
Yeah.
and I'm looking, just doing minding my business and making this film. And I'm looking at archival footage at her funeral. And I see, oh, that's Grandpa and Grand Ruby at the funeral. Like they were there representing and supporting the people, like just like on a regular every day,
they
like
were,
not even for like
active.
the
They
big.
were
Right.
bigger than just artists. They were
Right.
activists.
Right.
They were poets. They were a lot of different things. What's that sign over there that you brought?
Oh, I'm glad you pointed that
With
out.
you.
So, in honor of Yusuf, we are campaigning to change Verona Place. Thank you, brother. Verona Place. That's where Yusuf's mural is now.
Okay.
In Bed-Stuy. We're
Right.
going to change the name of the street to Yusuf Green Hawkins Way.
Okay.
Nice.
And we're hoping to get everyone's support.
How can we support you? How can the people? Is there a petition or something like
There is a
that?
petition. We're getting the community board to get behind us so they can understand that people care and this is an important thing that they should get behind.
Is there an online petition? Because we have thousands of viewers that I know for a fact would be ready to sign this
Right.
petition.
If you go and you follow Storm Over Brooklyn,
Okay.
then you'll be able to find out everything and get your hands on the petition. It's
Once
Storm-
again, Storm Over Brooklyn. And that's the name of the documentary, correct?
Right. Yeah, the full name is Yusuf Hawkins Storm Over Brooklyn, but all the social media is Storm Over Brooklyn on
Okay.
Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. Follow Storm Over Brooklyn. StormOverBrooklyn.com, you said as well?
No, not that.
Okay.
No, not yet. We didn't do
We ain't
that.
get that much money yet to be holding
I have a
servers
question
and shit.
about
Sure
the
thing. Yes.
documentary. Did you get a chance to speak with any of the assailants at all?
I spoke with Joey Farmer, who's in prison right now.
Mm.
He's the one person in prison right now for Yusuf's
He's
murder.
the actual shooter, right? Or no?
See, the thing that makes it not as clean as I would like it to be is he's not in prison for shooting. He's in prison for second-degree murder, and it's not as the shooter. It's depraved indifference. Depraved indifference to murder is the term. And I'm not a lawyer, but it's basically you were participating in
Right, and you didn't
some
do
act.
nothing.
Yeah, you didn't do anything to stop it. So no one is
Okay.
in jail, and no one ever has been in jail
For the
actual shooting
itself.
And that's what Yusuf's father was saying in the press a lot back then. Like you think that there's justice, but there's not. There was 30 people who surrounded, and one of them ended up shooting Yusuf. But I can see another case if there was some other other color 30 people surrounding somebody, and then that person got killed. You have acting in concert. You have felony murder. You know what I'm saying? There's reasons why more people should have been.
Right, well, look at the
culpable
Central
for it.
Park Five, right?
Right.
They hauled it. You was in the park that day. You come with
Right,
us. Oh,
right.
you wasn't in the park. You too.
Right.
Like they just rounded everybody up.
Right.
So you did this over the course of 4 years?
No, it actually, once we got the budget, it was 1 year. We were very quick with that.
Okay.
I came on board in 2016. Victorious and Charles, I think, have been doing it since 2015, I believe.
Okay.
So, yeah, 3 years,
Right.
Yeah.
So you're doing this documentary, and as you're doing this, you're seeing a lot of things going on right now that are reminiscent of this story. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Of how, 30 years later, it seems like not much has really changed.
Right. I think about it a lot. I mentioned denial earlier, and I think that's what allows things to continue. Is publicly we allow people to just deny the existence of something that's deadly to us. And I don't mean just they say racism 2.0 is to say racism doesn't exist, right? But it's not only just racism. It's look at a map of all the boroughs of New York City. If you look at a New York Times article about mapping segregation. There's lines
Right.
where black people
Red
live, white
line.
people live, and that still exists today.
Mhm.
And the segregation is even worse in the school systems now. So that, if you add that with the fact that we have economic disparity, and if you add that to the denial that racism exists, you're gonna have a bunch of people who feel entitled to treat other people any sort of way that they want, you know, and racism is not condemned as it should be publicly in all communities, you know. So it opens the door for things like this to happen. And a lot of the population that lived in Bensonhurst migrated to Staten Island. And that's where.
And I live on Staten Island right now.
So you feel any of that?
Of course.
Yeah, that's
Of course.
And Eric Garner was out
Like
there.
you gotta understand when you ride around Staten Island, you see all these blue ribbons. And you know, because that's in support of the police, you know, and it's definitely a racist climate in Staten Island. But you know, I can't say I've had anybody ever say, "Oh, you nigger" to me, but you know, it's definitely, and you see the redlining out there. You see, like, one side of the expressway is where the white people live at. And then on the other side, you know, when they talk about the wrong side of the tracks, in Staten Island, it's the expressway, Staten Island Expressway. You live on one side of it, towards the North Shore, that's where the black people, towards the South Shore is the white people.
So, yeah, that's how it is.
Forget about
it's
it.
So funny, the Italians, when they came, you got to see PBS. The Italian-American PBS, you know, Ken Burns. The best documentary maker, Ken Burns. You have to see the PBS Italian American saga because it's so good. When they got here, they looked like they were from India. Dark. Dark. They were dark. They were treated like shit because they're not fully white. Right. But then once they got here, they could sign, you're white, you're white, you're white. So then they got the privileges of being white. They were living in the ghettos first, like with the Irish.
Right, and what happened to them though? They kind of blame on black people.
And, yeah, everything is blamed.
They say, you know, but it really happened on. They didn't understand the macro forces that were involved with. If they bought a house and they put all that was their nest egg, and then black people moved on the block and they saw their house go down in value, they'll just think, oh, it's because of the black people. They don't understand that there's these banks, there's these loan companies, there's
that's
public
creating
policy.
that.
Right, and people like Ed Koch who prioritized expanding his tax base, which means catering to the people who are wealthy and ignoring the people who aren't wealthy. All that combined, it divides people so much. And if I'm white and I'm angry and I'm going through some tough times and somebody's telling me it's these black people and I'm not thinking, then I might have some hatred in me, you know, that doesn't get resolved if everyone around me is like, oh, yeah, racist. They don't condemn racism and they let things slide. So then you have people. There was Deshaun McKenzie. There was a little 16-year-old boy in Staten Island who got killed in 2016, chased by a bunch of white people. And it's like it just happens, and it is what it is. But no one really stops the lies. The lies keep happening. And
we actually did a show a couple of weeks ago, Nature versus Nurture, where you know it's my belief that the way racism is taught generation after generation, that it just becomes natural. It's almost like even, you know, people, you can have the purest intentions on the planet, and it's just you just see certain things and just hear certain things all your life. You just grow up believing like this is what it is. This class of people, this race of people are inferior, and you know it's okay to treat them however.
I will answer your question more fully. There's another brother. There was a black man there and was friends with the white people in Bensonhurst who surrounded Yusuf, and he participated in the film. And that was an interesting interview, so I look forward to people commenting on that. But I gotta say that it's not a monolith out there, and it's complicated, you know. But what's not complicated is the only reason they stopped Yusuf and his friends because they were the only black people around. Everything else is complicated about rumors about dating or about who in this group was actually racist, who in this group actually intended to kill, who was just there because their friends were there. The bottom line is that group only surrounded Yusuf and his friends because of the pigment of their skin. And that's what's tragic. But it's only that black man who participated and Joey Farmer who has nothing really to lose because he's already in prison. But no one else from the attackers agreed to participate.
So what made you get into filmmaking? I mean, I know your grandparents, Ossie, Davis and Ruby D, but you could have been an actor, you could have been a poet, you could have been a lot of different things. Why filmmaking?
It's funny. You probably would never guess. You remember the original cartoon movie of the Transformers?
Yeah.
Okay, so that came out when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my father took me to that film. And when I left, I started crying. He was like, "What? What is wrong?" I said, "I want the Transformers to be real." And he was like, "What?" He's like, I said, he said, be engineer is what he said. Be an engineer. So I went to engineering school, undergrad.
This ain't gonna help me make the Transformers.
I think I want to make films.
I'm gonna make my own Transformer.
Yeah, so like I think it was.
Let me find out. That's what you got into. You still want to make the Transformers?
I think
if you could make a Transformer movie, would you? If they said, "Here you go."
Yeah, as long as they don't do that weird stuff they do with the characters, like the whole culturally.
Oh, you're into it like that. Like, don't fuck it up.
Which one? The one where they had Jazz?
They got the characters talking all black and
shit. Like, what's up, homie? Right. And he got killed first.
Yeah, as long as that's not happening.
The black Transformer was killed first. We can't even be a fucking Transformer. Remember? He was like, calm down, Ironhide. Right. What's up? That's my man, Jazz. What's up, homie? I was like, oh, no. And then that Decepticon said, then the guy goes, you want a piece of me? I want the whole thing. I said, the black Transformer got killed. Mm-hmm. Ain't that a bitch?
Right.
Did it have a Japanese model?
I survived the horror movie.
And he actually went like this, too. I was so amazed. He was like,
you're an anomaly, Digga. You know.
Damn, we can't
but
not human.
It feels good to be moved by artwork, and I'm like, I was inspired by that, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on, Jazz, my homie Jazz. Oh, that made me so angry.
That's crazy.
Now, question for you, Muta.
Yes.
Do you feel like when this happened, when Amadou Diallo happened, it seemed like these were like these rare occurrences, and these names like kind of jumped out at you. Whereas now, because of social media and camera, and you're seeing so much of it, it's almost like, wait, who's the guy that got shot by the cops last week? What was his name again? It's almost like now it seems like it happens every day. Do you feel like this was always happening, and now we're just seeing, because of social media and everything being recorded, now we're just seeing more of it, or is it happening more now? What do you think?
I would say we're seeing more of it.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm a fan of Brian Stevenson and his Equal Justice Initiative, and I think I haven't gone down to see his museum, but he's putting markers, from what I understand, around all the trees where black people, men and women, were lynched. But there's no cameras back then, so I'm sure if there was, that's just a lynching, let alone shooting or all stuff like that. So I'm more than confident that it's been going on. But I think what I get worried about when it comes to social media is that whole cycle that happens where I get upset and then I don't do nothing or whatever. Like I feel what's the helpless, impotent is the word. I'm only able to get angry, and I know I go in engineering school. Instagram and Facebook love it when people get angry because that means you're just gonna use their software more or whatever. And then what am I really doing to like make a difference? I feel like what we've done with this film is at least giving the family that opportunity to get their voice out, because what's different about this story as opposed to other stories, including black people get murdered, is we get to see what happens to the family when the family decides, okay, my murdered son is gonna be as an example, so that we see what happens to black people in New York. That put Yusuf's mother in a position where she couldn't just mourn privately, mourn for the loss of her son privately. She's out there marching in the neighborhood, surrounded by these people yelling nigga to her, when she could be at home crying, And so we get to see a little bit more of an intimate perspective on the family's journey.
All right, well, listen, we thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, Muta'Ali, Storm Over Brooklyn. Storm Over Brooklyn on all social media, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's called Yusuf Hawkins, Storm Over Brooklyn, and it will be on HBO. We don't have a set time yet, but it's coming. Check them out. Clap it up. Muta'Ali. Yanadameen Godcast.